Hi, this is Paul. This is a video. This is a video.
So in a sense, we're already living under a moderate rule of the Antichrist in that telling.
We
Do you
are,
think God is in control of history?
Man, this is again like
We
I think that there's always room for human freedom and human choice. These things are, you know, or at least where we are today. These things are, they're not, they're not absolutely predetermined one way or another.
right.
I
But God wouldn't leave us forever under the rule of a mild, moderate, stagnationist Antichrist, right? That can't be how the story ends, right?
it's attributing too much causation to God is always a problem. If I don't know, there are different Bible verses I can give you, but I'll give you John 15:25, where Christ says, "They hated me without cause," and so it's all these people that are persecuting Christ have no reason, no cause for why they're persecuting Christ. And if we interpret this as a ultimate causation verse, they want to say, I'm persecuting because God caused me to do this. God is causing everything. And the Christian view is anti-Calvinist. God is not behind history. God is not causing everything. If you say God's causing everything,
but God is. But wait.
you're scapegoating God.
But God is
You're
behind. Oh,
scapegoating
okay.
God.
But God is behind Jesus Christ entering history because God was not going to leave us in a stagnationist, decadent Roman Empire, right? So at some point. At some point, God is going to step in.
I'm not
right?
I am not that Calvinist, and
that's not Calvinism, though. That's just Christianity. God will not leave us eternally, staring into screens and being lectured by Greta Thunberg. Right? He will not abandon us to that fate.
It is. There is a great, I don't know, for better and for worse. I think there's a great deal of scope for human action, for human freedom. If I thought these things were deterministic, you might as well, maybe just accept it. The lions are coming. You should just have some yoga and prayerful meditation and wait while the lions eat you up. And I don't think that's what you're supposed to do. It's.
Let me remind you, this conversation is happening. If you look up, way up here, this is New York Times opinion. Now, Douthat, of course, is the Roman Catholic on, I'm sure there's more Roman Catholics on staff, but the Roman Catholic on staff. Everybody assumes that he will touch upon religious, but this conversation with Peter Thiel, this is the most thoroughly conversation imbued with religion that I have seen in a long time. Thiel's theology is all over this conversation. And this is a great conversation, I think, to demonstrate when Vervaeke talks about, I think theology again is going to be, I'm just going to fill it in terms of some traditional language, is once again going to be the queen of the sciences. This is it, because this conversation goes all over the place, and it's also focused, and it's focused on deep subjects such as what is eschatology, what is humanity, what does it mean to believe. Now, I can't help but watch this and sort of compare this with Jordan Peterson's conversation with Peter Thiel. Jordan Peterson's conversation with Peter Thiel was not great. I don't know that it was good. It just didn't, and of course you can't blame that on Peterson wholly, but Douthat brought something out of Thiel that Peterson didn't, and there's a ton of really interesting stuff in this. I don't have a lot of time right now, but I wasn't going to make another video today, but I saw this and I couldn't not make a video about it. I've been playing around with this little AI add-on called Recall, because it'll give little summaries. So it helps me find things in videos. You can always sort of search for keywords on the transcript, but this'll give a little bit more. It gives, well, it's AI, and so you understand. Of course, Thiel is talking about stagnation. And it's fun that he's talking with Douthat because, of course, Douthat wrote this book on decadence. And so they're both trying to grapple with... So politicians will have sort of like right track, wrong track polls. And I've always been fascinated by the ways that we try to have accurate summations of things that are, by virtue of combinatorial explosiveness, too large for us to get our little pea brains around. And so what Thiel has to do when he talks about stagnation is he'll have to talk about things that, well, expectations, and they talk about the Back to the Future movies. And the Back to the Future, we don't have the flying cars and we don't have the flying skateboards. Douthat comments that Biff is president and Donald Trump, which Thiel didn't seem to chuckle. Thiel has some ambiguous things to say about getting involved in politics like he has. But so a lot of the stuff that they start out with about decadence and stagnation and AI, and then transhumanism, that was okay. But then he said some really interesting things. Here I have this fancy AI summary thing, and where do I go to get the start of the clip? I go down to the little notes beneath, or I still search the keywords. I don't know if I'll keep doing that AI thing. You play with it, you see if it works. If it doesn't work, you stop using it.
There is a political dimension of getting back to the future. You can't, I don't know, this is a conversation I had with Elon back in 2024, and we had all these conversations. I had the seasteading version with Elon where I said, if Trump doesn't win, I want to just leave the country. And then Elon said, there's nowhere to go.
Now, what's interesting in this is that part of what gets exposed is the implicit belief, and I find this amongst Christians and non-Christians and, across the board, that fundamentally politics is our salvation or our perdition. And what's interesting about this video is that Thiel isn't going to deal on that too much. Now, for him, of course, he's, as with the clip that I just played before, he's wondering to what degree has our culture or our governments contributed to this stagnation. In that sense, he's sort of playing around with Eric Weinstein type of ideas. But then he has this interesting conversation with Elon Musk.
There's nowhere to go. This is the only place. And then, you always think of the right arguments to make later. And it was about 2 hours after we had dinner and I was home that I thought of, wow, Elon, you don't believe in going to Mars anymore. 2024.
Now that, when he said that, it was like, ooh, that's a real point. Because this gets into some of the Peterson stuff, of course, because, well, we have these ideas that we think we believe. We have these, of course, I've been neck deep in confessionalism and all of that stuff recently, but he just notices that for Elon, going to Mars had been his eschatological belief. That was his hope. That was his salvation. And, Eric Weinstein, again, we got to get off this rock, all of this. And Thiel caught that. He caught that. And this, again, back to Vervaeke's comment. So I know somebody who is a pastor of a church that I had certain connections with in the Bay Area. And I know that this is a long time ago that this pastor, theologian, had been having like weekly meetings with Peter Thiel. And they were obviously talking about theology. And this was a Reformed minister. So, as they talk about Calvinism, Thiel is not unfamiliar with Calvinism, I would guess.
For 2024 is the year where Elon stopped believing in Mars, not as a silly science tech project, but as a political project. Mars was supposed to be a political project. It was building an alternative. And in 2024, Elon came to believe that if you went to Mars, the socialist US government, the woke AI, it would follow you to Mars. It was the Demis meeting with Elon that we sort of brokered. He was doing DeepMind.
This is an AI company.
Yeah, this was the rough conversation was, Demis tells Elon, I'm working on the most important project in the world. I'm building a superhuman AI. And Elon responds to Demis, well, I'm working on the most important project in the world. I am turning us into interplanetary species. And then Demis said, well, my AI will be able to follow you to Mars. And then Elon sort of went quiet. But
right there, you're sort of getting at the roots of what our true religion is. Again, my definition of a religion is that which determines what is highest and how we get there. And so for Musk, being an interplanetary species, there's your eschatology. And for the AI guy, having AI, but they talked here about AI, and well, what exactly is AI, and where does this, what exactly is it? They also now Thiel will drop. Thiel should know better than this, that it's not just the Orthodox have the fancy word theosis, which sort of captured the imagination in certain groups, but all of Christianity believes in transformation. But what's so interesting and so deeply religious about this conversation is they are actually naming aspects of transformation that haven't sort of been named, partly because they've not been around for us to think about, and partly because churches get stagnant. And again, part of what churches do as bearers of tradition is they limit and narrow language, and so you can't talk about some of these things.
But in my telling of the history, it took years for that to really hit Elon. It took him till 2024 to process it.
But that doesn't mean he doesn't believe in Mars. It just means that he decided he had to win some kind of...
Okay, so what do we mean when we say doesn't believe in Mars? I mean, this, again, we can go back to Peterson and doesn't believe in God. There's a deep thing going on here, because when Elon Musk believes in Mars, there is a religious quality to that belief. Now, Clara had a little live stream this morning, and Neil and Matt jumped in.
What was your question? Is being religious optional? And I think in this framing, I think there's a lot of people on whatever the right wing is, however we define it, who are willing to go with you with this paper, so long as we're willing to say that being religious is a universal, it's indelible to the human condition. So okay. It's not something that's the right does more than the left.
I would have liked to have seen the paper go in that direction. I would have liked to have seen them say, okay.
But again, so we talked about what religion has come to, well, how we come to define religion in a secular space. And Matt, of course, sort of puts his finger on it and says, is religion optional? And it really isn't. And that's what you see here, where for Musk, going to Mars is religious. And for Thiel, I would have to say the continued evolution of the human being is religious.
Hype? Do you think people are trying to raise money by pretending that we're going to build a machine god, right? Is it hype? Is it delusion? Is it something you worry about? I think you would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is eschatology. You would prefer the human race to any pauses. And I'm not trying to take a cheap shot or anything, but Douthat, of course, is like, and that just shows, wow. You read back C.S. Lewis, and he'll be sort of engaging with people like H.G. Wells and the atheists of his time, and of course the assumption beneath is humanity must be preserved. Well, what do we mean by humanity? Well, see, that's such a deeper question.
I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
in this.
Should
the human race survive?
Yes.
Okay.
But I also would I also would like us to radically solve these problems.
Right.
And so it's always, I don't know.
And just even right there, I'd like us to radically solve these problems. Okay, well, what is the relationship between human race survival and these problems, and radically solved, and where is this going?
Transhumanism is this, the ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. And there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or I don't know, transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses, and a transsexual is someone where you change your penis into a vagina, and we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And okay, we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, by the way, the critique Orthodox Christianity has of this is these things don't go far enough. Like that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul, and you need to transform your whole self. And
Douthat folds his paper, gets up in his show. Now we're talking.
So
right, but the other wait. I generally agree with what I think is your belief that religion should be a friend to science and ideas of scientific progress. I think any idea of divine providence has to encompass the fact that we have progressed and achieved and done things that would have been unimaginable to our ancestors. But it still also seems like, the promise of Christianity in the end is you get the perfected body and the perfected soul through God's grace. And the person who tries to do it on their own with a bunch of machines is likely to end up as a dystopian character.
Well, it's let's articulate this.
And you can have a heretical form of.
He paused before. We'll talk about sort of like a baseline pause, but what about that pause that he just made? This conversation off the charts.
Christianity, that says something else.
I don't know. I think the word nature does not occur once in the Old Testament, and so if
now we're cooking.
If you and there is a word in which a sense in which the way I understand the Judeo-Christian inspiration is it is about transcending nature. It is about overcoming things, and and the closest.
But of course, he knows enough Calvinism, creation, fall, redemption, restoration. It's what exactly are we looking to transcend? What exactly are we looking to rectify? What exactly is this entire movement inaugurated by God through Israel and Jesus Christ attempting to produce? And you've got infralapsarian and supralapsarian. I mean, this is so theological.
The thing you can say to nature is that people are fallen, and that's the natural thing in a Christian sense is that you're messed up, and that's true. But
depends what you mean by natural.
But there's some ways that with God's help, you are supposed to transcend that and overcome that. And,
right. But and the people,
if you just
present company accepted, most of the people working to build the hypothetical machine god don't think that they're cooperating with Yahweh, Jehovah, the Lord of hosts. They think that they're building immortality Ross, on their own.
Yeah,
right?
We're jumping around a lot of things. So again, the critique I was saying is they're not ambitious.
At one point, well, we're going to get to it. Yeah, this should have been way more than an hour. At one point, Peter Thiel says, "How much time do we have?" And Douthat's like, "All the time you need." And I'm like, "Really, Ross? Really? Is maybe Really? No, you're not gonna do what needs to be done here."
Ambitious enough.
Right.
From a Christian point of view, these people are not ambitious enough. Now, then we get into this question, well, are they
but they're not morally and spiritually ambitious enough.
And are they still physically ambitious enough? And are they even still really transhumanists? And this is where, the cryonics thing, that seems like a retro thing from 1999. There isn't that much of that going on. So they're not transhumanists on a physical body. And then, maybe it's not about cryonics. Maybe it's about uploading. Which, it's not quite. I'd rather have my body. I don't want just a computer program that simulates me. So that uploading seemed like a step down from cryonics. But then even that's, it's part of the conversation. And this is where it gets very hard to score. And I don't want to say they're all making it up and it's all fake, but I don't think
you think some of it's fake.
I don't think it's fake. Implies people are lying, but I want to say it's not the center of gravity.
Yeah.
And so there is a cornucopian language. There's an optimistic language. A conversation I had with Elon, a few weeks ago about this was he said, we're going to have 1 billion humanoid robots in the U.S. in 10 years. And I said, well, if that's true, you don't need to worry about the budget deficits because we're going to have so much growth. The growth will take care of this. And then
again, back with him and Elon in terms of Elon, what exactly is your religion? Well, I don't have a religion, or no, that's going away.
Well, he's still worried about the budget deficits. And then this doesn't prove that he doesn't believe in the billion robots, but it suggests that maybe he hasn't thought it through, or that he doesn't think it's going to be as transformative economically,
right,
or that there are big error bars around it. But yeah, there's some way in which these things are not quite thought through. If I had to give a critique of Silicon Valley, it's always bad at what the meaning of tech is, and the conversations, they tend to go into this microscopic thing where it's like, what are the IQ ELO scores of the AI, and exactly how do you define AGI, and we get into all these endless technical debates. And there are a lot of questions that are at an intermediate level of meaning that seem to me to be very important, which is like, what does it mean for the budget deficit? What does it mean for the economy? What does it mean for geopolitics? One of the conversations we had a few recently was you and I had was does it change the calculus for China invading Taiwan, where, if we have an accelerating AI revolution in the military, is China falling behind? And will this, and maybe on the optimistic side, it deters China because they've effectively lost. And on the pessimistic side, it accelerates them because they know it's now or never. If they don't grab Taiwan now, they will fall behind. And either way, this is a pretty important thing. It's not thought through. We don't think about what AI means for geopolitics. We don't think about what it means.
But then again, you have the optimism that thinking it through is something we can and will do, and that will lead to a resolution. One of the things I really liked about this was he said, well, maybe we'll get into the Antichrist stuff. I've only watched this once, so I don't really sort of have the time and sequence committed to my mind.
For the macro economy, and those are the kinds of questions I'd want us to push more.
There's also a very macroscopic question that you're interested in, that we'll pull on the religion thread a little bit here. You have been giving talks recently about the concept of the Antichrist, which is a Christian concept, an apocalyptic concept. What does that mean to you? What is the Antichrist?
How much time do we have?
We've got as much time as you have to talk about the Antichrist.
So maybe I was unfair to Ross in that this is Thiel's time limit here.
Antichrist.
All right. Well, I could talk about it for a long time. I think there's always a question. How do we articulate, some of these existential risks, some of the challenges we have, and they're all framed in this sort of runaway dystopian science text. There's a risk.
Okay, now these risks. What's interesting here is that this conversation has been really nimble, and it's been sort of able to hit different levels instead of just sort of keeping it on the political, temporal, physical. This conversation has been very nimble. It's been moving up and down. And what I really like where he goes here, he makes the observation that actually this Antichrist conversation and the perdition imagination sort of always goes in very predictable ways. And we should just notice that it goes in those predictable ways. And maybe we shouldn't just let it always stay in those places.
Risk of nuclear war. There's a risk of environmental disaster, maybe something specific like climate change, although there are lots of other ones we could come up with. There's a risk of bioweapons.
And so this is, we're going to get into Jordan Hall and his polycrisis.
You have all the different sci-fi scenarios. Obviously, there are certain types of risks with AI. But I always think that if we're going to have this frame of talking about existential risks, perhaps we should also talk about the risk of another type of a bad singularity, which I would describe as the one world totalitarian state. Because I would say the political...
Which, of course, you sort of find in the book of Revelation as Antichrist, one world government. I mean, it's just fascinating that, maybe that's sort of what's driving Thiel there. But then when he plays this out, it's really compelling.
Solution. The default political solution people have for all these existential risks is one world governance. What do you do about nuclear weapons? We have a United Nations with real teeth that controls them, and they're controlled by an international political order. And then something like this, is also what do we do about AI? And we need global compute governance. We need a one world government to control all the computers, log every single keystroke to make sure people don't program, a dangerous AI. And I've been wondering whether that's sort of a, going from, the frying pan into the fire. And so the atheist philosophical framing is one world or none. That was a short film that was put out by the Federation of American Scientists in the late 40s. Starts with a nuclear bomb blowing up the world. And obviously you need a one world government to stop it, one world or none.
And that's fascinating. Because, of course, when one might say, well, but what is the Christian eschatological view? It's the return of the Son of Man who comes with the clouds, the Ancient of Days, Daniel 7, set up his thrones, stilled the beasts, and then from heaven comes the Son of Man with the clouds and sets up an eternal empire, and this empire will have no end. But again, the question is, well, what kind of an emperor is he, and what kind of a rule will that be?
And the Christian framing, which in some ways is the same question, is Antichrist or Armageddon. You have the one world state of the Antichrist, or we're sleepwalking towards Armageddon. One world or none, Antichrist or Armageddon, on one level are the same question. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but sort of one question is, and this was a plot hole in all these Antichrist books people wrote, how does the Antichrist take over the world? He gives these demonic, hypnotic speeches, and people just fall for it. And so it's this plot hole. It's this daemon.
Now this gets into a little bit of the Peugeot. I just watched Peugeot with the guy who used to be Mumford and Son, and they were talking about, of course, the post-war consensus, and I think part of the reason why that sort of grabbed our imagination in the late 20th century in terms of what Antichrist would be is, well, part of it is the shape of some of the text of Revelation with respect to the horn, and to what degree is that talking about Nero, yada yada. I'm working on the book of Revelation now because I'm going to be preaching in Revelation for the few sermons I'm actually preaching this summer, just the way the summer's working out. But I think partly in terms of the post-war consensus, this was Hitler, because that was sort of, Hitler was this mesmerizing speaker. And I remember growing up, the mythology that I heard is that Hitler sort of mesmerized Germany and brought Germany into the sway, even though Hitler never got a majority vote. He sort of took over in the way that, Mussolini took over and Hitler took over. I mean, fascism partly is about the way that one takes over the government.
Right. It's implausible.
It's a very implausible plot hole.
Right.
But I think we have an answer to this plot hole. The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop. And this is what you...
Kind of sounds like YouTube, because I'll tell you, once you click on something that's a little bit end of the world-ish, YouTube just loves to feed those fears.
Need to regulate. It's the opposite of the picture of Baconian science from the 17th, 18th century, where, the Antichrist is like some evil tech genius, evil scientist who invents this machine to take over the world. People are way too scared for that. In our world, the thing that has political resonance is the opposite. It is the thing that has political resonance is we need to stop science. We need to just say stop to this. And this is where, I don't know, in the 17th century, I can imagine a Dr. Strangelove, Edward Teller type person taking over the world. In our world, it's far more likely to be Greta Thunberg.
Okay, I want to suggest a middle ground between those two options. It used to be that the reasonable fear of the Antichrist was a kind of wizard of technology. And now the reasonable fear...
And look at the supervillains and, superhero movies. Always, they're under a volcano and they're a wizard of technology. It's Megamind.
Is someone who promises to control technology, make it safe, and sort of usher in what, from your point of view, would be a kind of universal stagnation, right?
Well, it's more...
And there's hell. It's a universal stagnation. It's C.S. Lewis's The Gray City.
That's more my description of how it would happen.
Right.
So I think people still have a fear of a 17th century Antichrist.
Yes.
We're still scared of Dr. Strangelove.
Right, but you're saying the real Antichrist would play on that fear and say, you must come with me to avoid Skynet, to avoid the Terminator, to avoid nuclear Armageddon.
Yes.
And I guess my view would be, looking at the world right now, that you would need a certain kind of novel technological progress to make that fear concrete, right? So I can buy that the world could turn to someone who promised peace and regulation if the world became convinced that AI was about to destroy everybody, right? But I think to get to that point, you need one of the accelerationist apocalyptic scenarios to start to play out, right? To get your peace and safety Antichrist, you need more technological progress. Like, one of the key failures of totalitarianism in the 20th century was it had a problem of knowledge. It couldn't know what was going on all over in the world, right? So you need the AI or whatever else to be capable of helping the peace and...
And so Douthat says, and by the way, aren't you the guy that's setting up the Antichrist in this scenario? The other thing was, one of the key failures of totalitarianism was, again, C.S. Lewis's, this great quote from the Screwtape Letters. This is, of course, one demon writing to another. To us, a human is primarily food. Our aim is the absorption of its will into ours. That is sort of the totalitarian myth. And I think in some ways, if you look at Thiel, his fear is not necessarily the absorption, the colonization of our wills to some end, but basically the numbing and diminution of our wills. Just sort of, Brave New World basically gets at that. But the obedience which the enemy demands of men is quite a different thing. One must face the fact that all the talk about his love for men and his service being perfect freedom is not, as one would gladly believe, mere propaganda, but an appalling truth. He really does want to fill the universe with a lot of loathsome little replicas of himself. There's the theosis. Creatures whose life on its miniature scale will be qualitatively like his own, not because he has absorbed them, but because their wills freely conform to his. We want cattle who will become food. He wants servants who will become sons. And this, of course, is what happens to every totalitarian regime. It's that everyone lives in fear and not love. Well, some always strangely love. But we want servants who can finally become, we want cattle who can finally become food. He wants servants who can finally become sons. We want to suck in. He wants to give out. We are empty and would be filled. He is full and flows over. Our war aim in a world in which our Father below has drawn all other beings into himself. The enemy, meaning God, wants a world full of beings united to him, but still distinct. Fascinating. So if you haven't watched that with Douthat and Thiel, definitely take a look, and I will probably watch it more than once. So I am out of time. Leave a comment.